Well, I had graduated college in 1961. I had an engineering degree, and I grew up in the Bronx in New York City, and I wanted to travel. So I got a job pretty much as far away as I could get in Seattle, Washington. I was working for Boeing. And around that time, John F. Kennedy had made that famous speech, ask not what your country can do for you. And I had worked for about 6 months there, and then I came to the realization that I could always come back and do this job that I was doing. And I was at a certain age where I was free. I didn't have any responsibilities, anybody tying me down. I wanted to travel, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to do some service for the country. And so I sent in my application, and lo and behold, they accepted me to Ecuador. Ecuador 4, we were the fourth group. The other ones had come fairly recently before us, but there were enough people in the area that they had somebody there that we would sort of communicate with them, and they were supposed to find us positions or things to do. So here you had enough 15, 20 of the engineers, you had other people, and the local people there, they weren't really sure what they were going to do with us. So one day the director calls me in and he says, look, we have a job for you if you're willing to take it. It's way up in the mountains, in the Andes Mountains. We're building an irrigation canal, and they could use somebody else to help with the surveying party. So we spent a couple months. There was a question because what we were doing is the town was in a valley, and there was a big mountain right next to it. And the top of the mountain, a little further back in it, was a river. And the river went actually to the east, a small river, and an uninhabited land, and it traveled eventually it ended up in the Amazon. And what they were going to do, they were going to divert some of the water. Instead of going east to the Amazon, they were going to take it down to the west where their farms were. And so I went back and I told them, I said, look, I think the project will work. I would say it would take about 2 years to complete, not knowing. I had never built a canal myself.
Did you ever wonder, what the heck is a boy from the Bronx doing here?
I sure did. But, it's a matter of circumstances. You don't choose where you grow up. You don't choose where you end up. It's just a matter of circumstances. I enjoyed it. To me, it was a completely different kind of experience. We had time. They would give us time for a little vacation. I think we had maybe 2 or 3 weeks every year or something like that. I don't know what they do now. And so 4 or 5 of us found time, and we traveled all over South America, all the way down to Chile and Bolivia and Peru and Argentina. So as a sequel to that, 40 years later, I finished in 66. 2006, I just retired. And one of the other people that worked with me, his name was Gary, he sent me something from the internet that in the mountains where we were doing the canal, that in the area, a Canadian company was mining for gold in the mountains, right where the canal was. So I took it as a sign. Now I was free. I've been working for 40 years. I was a teacher and an assistant principal in the city, and I had run a learning center. And after 40 years of working, in 2006, I was free again. So we got in touch with the mining company, and we said, we're planning to come down. Is there any place we could stay with you people? And sure enough, the guy wrote back, oh, sure, we have a camp there, and you're welcome to come down. And it'd be good for you to come down because we're digging on land from the government. And it'd be good to have good public relations between us and the Canadian government and the Canadians and the local people. I don't really know who owned the land where we were doing the canal. There was just this big mountain.
Yeah, and you probably didn't have much concept of owning land.
Land, yeah. I mean, it was just because nobody would live there. It was just mountains. So they said, sure, come down. So the two of us, we packed up and we set up a whole itinerary, and we flew down to Ecuador 40 years later. And we did a little traveling around, and then we drove back to the town. And once a year, we try to time it, they have a festival, a religious festival. And where people come that haven't from neighboring towns, and that they would all get together, and so that would be a great time to go. We didn't have any communication between us and the local people. At that time, there were computers then, but when we left, the only way we could communicate from the town, they had a telegraph. That was the way. There were no phones there. But anyhow, so we tried to time. We ended up, we were a week off in our timing.
Oh, no.
But we got there, and we met with the mayor. Most of the people that we had known had either passed away or moved away. We only met one person who was 16 at the time. He was a young kid, and he sort of remembered helping his father at that point. And so we went and we took a walk. We walked the whole length of the canal just to see if it was working. And sure enough, the canal was still there. They were still using the water. When I left it, I said, "Gee, I started this. Is this going to ever be finished?" I had no
And will it really work?
And it really worked.
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing was, when you build a canal, you have to make it go downhill, but you can't make it down too fast, and you don't want it to go uphill. So you're laying out a line that's about 15 miles long, and it has to have a certain pitch to it, and it has to be a certain size, and there are places where it'll collapse. There'll be falling rocks and things like that.
Yeah.
But they had a guy, his job was every week he would walk the whole length just to inspect. So we went up with him and we walked the whole length, and sure enough, the canal was still there.
Oh, that must have made you feel
so that
wonderful.
was a nice experience.